Next major factor, Chinese buying demand for gold. What is happening in China is one of the great phenomenons of any of our lifetimes. It is incredible, China's amazing rise to superpower status. We've not seen anything like this in probably any of our lifetimes. David talked about how the baton in the 1800s, the world belonged kind of to England. In the 1900s, it belonged to America. And now in this century, the whole world balance of power is shifting to Asia. I spend probably 6 months out of the year out in Asia, all over Asia, including China and so forth. And I will tell you, it's the biggest boom part of the world, and it is a wave of the future. Asia is the wave of the future. The world balance of power is shifting to Asia. And you can note China is the big gorilla in all of that, although India is pretty close behind them. Both of those countries are just growing like mad. Never in history has a poor third world country risen to superpower status with respect to wealth, manufacturing, exports, rising standard of living, expansion of infrastructure, military prowess, financial power, etc., as fast as China has over the last 15 to 20 years. Within 10 to 15 years, China will pass the U.S. in many respects, including militarily. They are building their military so fast today you cannot believe it. Under the Clinton administration, we transferred much of our high-tech nuclear missile technology to China so they could jump right over. They didn't have to spend a lot of time on R&D. We gave it to them. Those are the people that want to come back to the White House. Okay? But what they're not buying or borrowing or stealing, they're also getting from Russia. And so militarily watch out for China. China will be the big military power in that part of the world, and within 10 to 15 years will be in a position to begin to challenge the United States of America. Within 10 to 20 years, China may have the world's reserve currency, a gold-backed yuan or renminbi. Okay? And we'll talk about that in a minute. They're moving in that direction. And one of the reasons they're growing so fast, besides the fact that the powerful establishment people in this country set that whole thing in motion 25 or 30 years ago when Richard Nixon and Kissinger went over there and the Bushes followed, et cetera, et cetera. And the whole idea was to build up China. And there are some strong political reasons, which I won't go into now. China has an advantage over us. Their wages are 25 cents to $1 an hour. Ours are $15 to $30 an hour. How do we compete? And that's why you have thousands of factories, tens of thousands of factories in America shuttering their doors and moving over to China where they can get cheap labor. Okay? And that's a fact of life. China's economic explosion, truly unprecedented. They use 25% of the world's steel and 40% of all concrete. They are now consuming 25% of the world's copper, largest consumer of copper in the world. They've just negotiated contracts with Chile for the next 25 years to take 50% of their copper production. So they're going out and they're grabbing raw materials wherever they can go, all over the world. By the way, Japan went to war in part over oil and raw materials back in the 1941 period. Countries will ultimately go to war over food, over raw materials, and over oil, maybe even one day over water. China has 160 cities with populations of over 1 million. America has 9. China has 220 million surplus workers in its central and western regions. The U.S. has only 140 million workers in total, and that number is diminishing. China is behind the most explosive move in commodities probably in all of world history because they're soaking up every commodity you can imagine. Whatever commodity there is in the world, they're buying it like there is no tomorrow because they have this massive expansion going on. And so when you look at that CRB, let me tell you something, that's not temporary, that's going to keep on going. China has more speakers of English as a second language than America does as a first language. Can you imagine? China is the world's second largest consumer of oil. By 2025, China will use 25 million barrels of oil per day. That's equal to America's consumption today. And China is lining up huge long-term oil contracts with Iran, Venezuela, Nigeria, and Russia. By the way, I was just in India a couple of weeks ago, and they've announced Tata Motors, T-A-T-A, has announced that they're coming out with a car in November. It'll cost $2,500. $2,500. That's pretty cheap. Okay? They're estimating that over the next 5 to 10 years, they will put another 100 to 200 million cars on the roads in India. Do you know how much gas and oil and energy they're going to consume? And China's not going to be left behind, so China will have to come out with a $2,500 car, and they can put a few hundred million more people on the road. The crunch that's going to continue to take place with respect to oil is going to go on for a long time, and that's why $150 to $200 a barrel oil is, in my opinion, almost guaranteed. Okay, China, the poor Chinese, they have a dilemma. What do you do with $1.4 trillion in currency reserves, foreign currency reserves? They're only piling up about $240 billion a year in surpluses. They sell all this stuff to America. Be proud when you go in to Walmart and you buy Chinese, not American, you buy Chinese, because that's almost all that's on the shelf. You start looking at almost everything you've got, and my friends, it's made in China. You know that China now has the production capacity to produce every single product in the world that every single person in the world consumes. So, so they're piling up all these foreign currency reserves. Of the $1.4 trillion, $1 trillion of those is in U.S. dollars, and therein lies their problem. Okay, because the U.S. dollar in the last 7 years has dropped 40%. And so they're losing money very fast being in the dollars. By the way, so are every one of us. So are every one of us being in U.S. dollars. China has begun to diversify its reserves out of dollars and into euros, British pounds, Japanese yen, a basket of currencies, and into gold. And their government is encouraging their people to buy gold hand over fist. Okay, and so is the Indian government, as American government is discouraging people from buying gold, and they're surrogates on Wall Street. Okay? Over the next few years, as Chinese trade surpluses continue to build at a minimum of 180 billion to 240 billion per year, China is likely to dramatically slow down its purchase of treasury bills, bonds, and notes. They've been helping to finance our deficits. The U.S. government doesn't have enough money to run the U.S. government. Wouldn't it be nice if they downsized some since they don't have enough money? But they turn around and they borrowed from China and Japan and all these countries out in Asia. So those folks are helping to pay for the running of the U.S. government. Doesn't that make you feel good? And so the foreigners are basically buying the treasury paper that's been floated to cover the deficits. Okay, all of this will put, as they start backing away from buying that paper and everybody in the world starts backing away, this will put downward pressure on the U.S. dollar and strong upward pressure on U.S. interest rates and inflation. As David, I think, pointed out, but you've seen interest rates drop 300 basis points. Interest rates dropped 300 basis points since last September. Short-term interest rates, an artificial drop in interest rates. And, you know, they're at 2.25 now. They're headed for 2% by this summer, and they may take them down to 0. But they can't control long-term interest rates. And while that's all been happening, our long-term 30-year mortgage rates only dropped 50 basis points, or about 0.5%. Okay? And as the dollar starts getting dumped worldwide, this is going to put tremendous